But a lot of that has to do with the fact that Hollywood had a code at the time beyond what we have now, which is just the ratings from the Motion Picture Association. So, which sets standards that you have to and parameters and criteria for what spectrum to be in if you want this to be a PG-13 or a PG or G or R.
Mm-hmm.
And unrated being like, okay, that this is just so bad that we're not even going to try. There was a code that was originally put in place because most of the movies that were made in the 1920s were just obscene. It was either pornography or it was just bad.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, the code is put in place. I think it's put in place in the mid to late 30s or the early 40s, and it is observed until the early 60s. And this is for both film and television. Television is a little bit different, but it winds up it observes the same code when it comes about, or it tries to for serialized television series. So basically, there were things in this code that you were and were not allowed to do when you made a movie, or it could not be produced in Hollywood. It was basically
Okay.
like a law. Eventually, it collapsed for a couple of reasons. One of which is they just kind of stopped enforcing it, and they started to allow little exceptions to happen, and in some cases, most of the time, when you start allowing exception after exception after exception, they just wind up building up, and then you wind up having trash again.
Mm-hmm.
So until ultimately the code is abolished, I think the code is just officially abolished, I think in the late 60s. And that's part of the reason why there were almost no good films made in the 70s and 80s, because with no more code to even like begrudgingly or technically follow, now we can just do whatever we please in movies. And when people are allowed to do whatever they please, they wind up producing filth.
What
Basically,
are the
they
contents
follow
of this
their own
code?
devices. They wind up producing filth. There are, of course, exceptions, but when the ratings commission shows up, and I think that's somewhere in the 90s, then the ratings commission shows up and they're like, all right, we're going to put the brakes on this now. I think we've had enough. And then now there's actually, and they put some kind of order to movies then again,
Fair enough. What were the
which
contents
really
of this
just sort
code?
of, it created a code without creating a code, because you start putting ratings on movies for who the ratings commission is like suggests is should be allowed to see this. There's, if it's R rated, nobody under the age of 17, or specifically NC 17, which is like the next step above R before you get to unrated, which is one that not a lot of movies are given these days. It's just like R most of the time. And PG-13, which is like if you're a teenager, okay. And then PG, which is older kids. Parents should probably just be aware. And then G, which is like, just trust me, this movie's fine.
I meant what are the
Fine
contents
for,
of the old code? Like what were they policing for back in the day?
I don't actually know what the criteria are. And I don't know that it's necessarily based on the old code, but it kind of winds up going back to that, because when you start doing that, the audience starts paying attention to the rating of the film. And then, you know, people start going, well, there's no point in me making the X-rated movies anymore.
Hmm.
Also, because a lot of theaters just finally went, you know what, we're not going to show this anymore. And local ordinances and I think state and federal laws started stepping in again. Um, I do have my criticisms of the original code. I understand why they were in place, but I think a lot of places it was way too strict. Because when you're dealing with people, you have to understand the fallenness of the human race, but without assuming that everybody is just evil completely and totally on the inside. Like, I know one of the rules of the old code was that in a movie, a husband and wife were not allowed to be depicted in the same bed. Like, their bedroom was not permitted to have a bed that was big enough for two people,
Okay.
even if they were never even in the bed. The only time anybody ever got away with this was in that I know of was in I Love Lucy in the first full season of it, but that's because Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz at the time were actually married. But even then, it's two separate beds, two separate mattresses that are pushed together. And then in a later season, I guess somebody stepped in and said, "Nope, nope, can't show that, too intimate." So we're going to put an end table in between them.
Which is funny because both of us can rant against, sexual impurity in multiple forms in modern film and TV, and yet, yeah, that's just prudishness.
That's prudishness, and it's absurd.
Yeah.
Because it's this idea, it's based on this thought that, oh, you know, people know what husbands and wives do in their bedroom. So, if you show a queen size bed, ooh, or if you show a bedroom that is occupied by a husband and wife, and it's obvious that they sleep in the same bed, ooh, that's horrible. Can't have that. Because people's minds are always going to just immediately go to sex after that, apparently.
Not if they're well
When
enough
even at the
formed.
time, most people, husbands and wives share a bed. You sleep in the same bed.
Mm-hmm.
For one thing, it's warmer. Easier to stay warm in the wintertime when you share a bed with somebody else. For another thing, I'm never sleeping in a twin bed again because I have a wife. I'm going to share my bed with my wife. That's what you do when you're married, because it's just proper and right. That is a rule that was probably made up by either a Protestant or a Catholic who thinks like a Protestant, thinking that sex is a necessary evil for the survival of civilization.
Yeah. It's kind of where my brain went to, was just like, I mean, sex is not a bad thing to think about. It can
Yeah.
be, but it's if you're well enough formed, it's kind of obvious, or hopefully it's obvious as to when it's getting there. So don't do that. But yeah, people have sex. Married couples have sex. It's part of life. It's how you showed up, and it's a holy and thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
to just
So
further say what you're already saying, because again, I have nothing
well,
original to contribute. This is your realm. So
so I've stated my opinion on like the violence that I'm willing to tolerate, and so at this point we've transitioned into uh, the limits on sexual content. That should be kind of obvious, even between married people. I don't really want to see something on screen that should not be done before you're married.
mm-hmm.
Now I know that that's also a very broad statement, because there are people that think that you shouldn't look at a woman below her eye level before you're married. Again, also absurdity and prudishness. There's nothing wrong with admiring a woman's figure. Nothing wrong with admiring that she has a nice figure, even if she's not wearing that many clothes, because you have to see that now in public. It's just, otherwise you just have to completely gouge out both of your eyes and go through the rest of your life blind. I don't want to do that because I like to look at my wife.
The purpose of custody of the eyes is not because she has a beautiful figure. It's for other reasons. So those
And
other
it's
reasons
not
dictate
so
the
much
line.
custody of the eyes as it is custody of the mind and the heart. Custody of the mind and the heart and thoughts. Like Father Larry Richards usually has said that The advice that he gives to teenage boys is, if you're walking down the walking along the beach and you pass by this girl and she's really cute. She's got cute face and the nice hair. She's got a nice figure. She's got the nice swimsuit. The right response should be, God does really great work. And then just to go, you do great work, God, keep it up. You made her beautiful. Keep making them beautiful. And
Fair
that
enough.
just is the proper reaction. So, but as far as like what I'm willing to tolerate in films, there are things that could be considered like technically sexual content that I'm willing to tolerate. Like the way that a woman is dressed in a movie applies, the same rule kind of applies because I have no control over that. And like there are times when definitely, yes, you should look away. Definitely look away. But there are also times when it's kind of like the same reaction to when you just sort of run into the girl on the beach.
I mean, really, that just gets into a conversation about modesty. And I think
Yeah,
it's
we'll have
pretty
my wife on when we talk about that.
fair enough. But without getting into where the lines are for that, which, yeah, can be saved for another time, I think you can make a pretty easy argument that just immodesty shouldn't be in films, period. Because you shouldn't put
No, you
that.
could say that it shouldn't be, but I'm making an argument for like what to do when it inevitably is.
Oh, sure. Yeah, then, like you
Because
said, the exact same rule applies.
how often do
So,
you come across a man that always does what he should or what he ought?
hmm
Never. There is no man besides our Lord and probably Saint Joseph to have ever been born that has always, under every circumstance, done what he ought.
Yep. If you're looking for us to be a role model, we ain't going to work. But we can point you to them and say, do that. So,
So, but as far as the sexual content, I'm not going to react the way that like Protestants do when it's like, oh my gosh, they're holding hands. Oh my gosh, they kissed. There are certain kinds of kissing where it's like, yeah, we probably let's not watch that because that's just this is a slobbery movie kiss that's like, no, I don't want to. I don't need to see anybody's tongue. Thank you very much. That's no.
hmm
When a certain level of intimate touching, which usually is, when a man touches a woman below the waist, and that's sides and back, below the neck if it's the front, for any reason other than to like pull her out of a burning building or like Superman catching the woman that's falling. But I think we all know that. I think at this point, there's enough films out there that are definitely past the line. People know when that sort of intimacy is going to happen. You can just kind of feel it when you're watching the movie,
hmm
which is kind of creepy with how that works because it's not necessarily even obvious. It's just like, I'm getting uncomfortable now. I think this is very shortly going to go someplace where I think I'm going to have to skip forward a couple of minutes.
Yep.
But yeah, basically, don't put anything on screen that shouldn't be between. Okay, why don't I put it this way? Don't go looking for anything in a movie that you wouldn't want to walk in on your parents doing.
I see the point of that. Yeah, I
I
see the
think we'll
point of
make
that.
that the line because there's like there's the teenage reaction to just the you see your parents kissing and you're like, ew, or dad makes a comment about mom and it's like, oh dad, ew, no, stop it. But
Let's.
that's all perfectly fine. Like if a kid walks in on his parents while they're in the process of making his a younger sibling,
We all
that's
know. We all know a line's been crossed.
that never
Yeah.
happened to me, but I'm told that that's traumatizing.
Fair enough.
And there's also like levels of intimacy that my wife and I probably aren't going to show. We're not going to get to that level when our kids are around.
Can't confirm. Never want to. So.
But yeah, I would say that that's probably the line for sexual content is just I don't want to see anybody doing on screen something that I'm not okay with seeing my parents doing, even though it's perfectly reasonable within their marriage.
Yeah,
But
like you
that's
said,
like,
that seems like a reasonable line to me. So
so usually kissing is fine, holding hands is fine. Yeah, to an extent, a little bit of touching is fine. But it's like, if you imagine yourself as a teenager walking into the kitchen and your mom and dad are in there and you're like, nope, just gonna do a little U-turn. Not to the point of making a younger sibling, but it's still like, I don't want to see that.
mm-hmm.
That's the line.
Fair enough. As we close, then, yeah. What are the if you had to give people three things to take away from this across the whole spectrum of things we've talked about, what would they be?
Well, film. So first off, film is a medium and a tool, and it's something that ought to be used to create art and to produce art, and not garbage or pornography. There ought to be a clearly defined moral line, and it should be in the right place, because a lot of times a lot of issues come about when you don't put the moral line in the right place, when it's either not far enough or way too far, which is what Protestants tend to do. And usually, when people rebel against the moral line, when they break it, they're breaking the one that is way too far ahead. But because that's the only one that was set for them, one of two things happens. Either that's the only one that was set for them, so they break it, realizing the thing that's just beyond it isn't that bad, so then they go, oh, all of the rest of this is okay, and then they just completely fall off the deep end. They just dive completely into the abyss. Or they come and they meet another line, and at that point, one of two things happens. Either they go, oh, that's where the line actually is. Oh, okay, I understand now. That makes a lot more sense. Or they now have a taste for rebellion. They like the high that they got from breaking that last line, so they're going to break this one too. And those are usually the people that don't have, that wind up not having a line to begin with. Or they wind up just not having any line at all because they have broken every single one and they didn't stop at the correct one. And lastly, most of the movies that we've talked about have been like technically action, adventure, epics, but that's because that's I'd say that's probably just our opinions of the kinds of movies that we really like.
Yeah, we're
Those
two
are
guys
usually
in their
the best
20s.
kinds
What do
of.
you expect us to talk about?
Well, they're usually the best kinds of movies for men, anyway. Um, but there's no one genre that is necessarily superior to another, like by the pure merits of the genre of film. And if you prefer horror, that's okay. I don't want to go into a movie wanting to be scared. If you prefer rom coms, that's okay. Just don't subject your boyfriend to too many of them. And if you're a male and prefer rom coms, I won't ask you, don't tell.
How about this? Drink a Cosmo and never talk to me again.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So film ought to be used to produce art and not garbage. There should be a clearly defined moral line, and it should be in the right place. And it is okay to have types of preferences as long as your preferences themselves are not immoral.
Yep, those seem like good points to me. So now I'll have to go watch McClintock or Rio Bravo or El Dorado again, I guess. So, but yeah, as you all should.
Everybody should go and watch the movies that we've talked about, other movies that we haven't, because believe me, there's a lot more that wound up in my list here that we didn't talk about, and other things that could probably wind up just being conversations in and of themselves, and probably will be.
For anybody that's interested, if you're still listening, we will put that list in the comments. So, or a link to it in the comments. So you can view the full list of what we could have talked about.
What we could have talked about and forgot to. Yeah, we'll put that in either the pinned comment or the description.
Yep. But you have to go watch McClintock.
Yes, you must. Everyone should. And that is non negotiable. That is a hard and fast rule. And I will also say this: this was my brother's 4 years older than me, and this was kind of the thing that he did when he was dating, when he would date a girl, to figure out what kind of girl that she was, or whether or not he would bother dating her further. Within the first 3 dates, he watched McClintock with her. I remember one girl he dated. It was McClintock. I think with his wife, I think it was The Quiet Man, because that's a similar kind of point being made. But that is going to be my family's movie, and anyone who wants to enter into my family has to be subjected to it. And you will be judged based on your reaction to that movie. It may seem silly to some people, but go watch the movie and you'll understand why. If it repulses you, I want nothing to do with you. If you like it, you and I are kindred spirits.
Fair enough. Well, y'all have your homework. And with that, we bid you all a good evening.